Okay, in this second tutorial I'd like to look at opening an existing Juvenal project and how we go about making changes or edits to that project. And I'm going to use the one that was created in a previous tutorial, which was a simple heart pendant. So I'm going to just select the Open Juvenal project button here, and that brings up a conventional file open dialog, and you can see that we're looking in the folder by default that we've defined as our project home, and I created this as part of the preceding tutorial, and in there will be a folder for every project I've created, including the heart pendant, which was the one we created earlier. And if I open that folder, inside is the actual 3D project file that we're after. So I select the 3D project file and click open, and we come back now to ArtCam. It's got no files open, but we now have the project open, which, if you remember, is a series of meshes and assemblies defined up here. So those assemblies can comprise meshes, such as the heart pendant itself, and also gems, like the little ruby that I placed in at the end of the last tutorial. And for these assemblies that are created from a particular art file, we've stored the art file that was used to create it. And this is important because now if I want to edit this model, like for example, I want to change the back of this model to be textured so that I won't have to polish it after the manufacturing process. So instead what I'd like is a little golf ball texture which is pleasing to the eye but won't require that high level of polished finish. Now I can't directly work on the 3D assembly. The way I need to change the 3D assembly is to revert to the ArtCam model that was used to create it. And within the projects we saw earlier, if I now browse this project, we can see that the project comprises not just the assemblies, but also it keeps a link to all the art files that were used to create them. And I can browse my project and see the directory structure underlying my project folder. So here we see a folder called Flat, and underneath it an ArtCam file indicated by this icon called Heart. And I just want to go back now to the Explorer, Windows Explorer, and here you can see the same folder on the disk, and if I open that, it has a folder inside it called Flat, which we see in the Browse Project option as a fold up, and inside we see the heart.art file. So the Browse Project is a simple way of just looking at the files, the file content of your folder, of your project. So we could open our heart, since this one is a simple case where this is related to just a single file, we could go back to the art file using that method. But an alternative method, which is useful when you start to build up more complicated Juvenal projects, is to use the assembly itself to find the model that was used to create it. So if I select the assembly and then use this button, Edit Associated Model, the assembly will find and load the model that was used to create it for you automatically. And here we are, back in the model that was used to create it. So we've got both the back and the front in the single art file, as you recall. And what I want to do is make an edit to this, which is to texture this region with a little golf ball texture on the back of the model. And to do that, I'm going to also use a very useful technique. And the reason I need to do that, if I remove the vectors for a second, you can see what we have here is a shape that is defined entirely by the underlying relief. And if I turn off the grayscale view, we've got no associated artwork with that shape. If you recall, the inside was created by offsetting the front relief to form the back. And consequently, we've got an outline here for the top, but it doesn't match the back. And I want to get this region so that I can identify it and texture it. So a very useful technique involves using the conventional grayscale view that has existed in ArtCam in previous versions too. But it's important to clarify what the distinction is between this view only and creating a grayscale 2D view. And what it boils down to is the X-ray view, as I like to call it, is a transient, temporary view of the current relief, but it does not actually make any permanent changes to my 2D artwork. I can toggle it on and off, and as you can see, the palette colors do not change, and there's no colors changed in the 2D view. However, an alternative method on this toolbar is to create a grayscale 2D image from the relief. And when I click that button, you'll notice that down here the palettes has changed to produce a series of greys, and this genuinely is now in the 2D artwork. If I turn off the vectors, you can see that this is the 2D artwork that represents our model. And we can still, of course, look at the X-ray view. The two happen to be coinciding at the moment, but as I edit the model, they may not later on. So just to clarify, the toggle button up here does not affect your 2D artwork. The actual 2D Create Grayscale from Relief tool creates the 2D artwork from the model. And in the case of generating further changes to the model based on this outline, that's what we require in this case. Okay, so now to crack on with the main task, which is to define this region so that I can put a shape over it. And I'm going to select the green as my primary colour by simply clicking with the left mouse button on the green, and I'm going to select the yellow, the base plane colour, by clicking with the right mouse button, and that now selects it as the secondary colour. And with those two colours selected, I can use this very useful tool here, Flood Fill Selective, which will flood fill with green every other colour it finds until it reaches the secondary colour. And what that's done for us is basically found all the regions of the model apart from the base plane. So it's a very useful tool for finding outlines of your artwork. Now we could use that colour directly, or if we wish as well, we can now go to the vector toolbar at the top here, and we can use Bitmap to vector, use the default values to create a vector shape that also finds that boundary. And if I turn that off, we can now see we've got the artwork back. We've recovered the artwork, the 2D border, back from a model when there was no artwork used to create it in the first place. So that's a useful technique, and I'm now going to put it into practice by using that border to texture the underlying relief, which I can do from the relief menu up here, relief texture. And you'll have various settings in here that will be the same as it will be remembered from your last use. But in this case, what I've got is 0.5 millimeter in size and just 0.2 mil high spheres. And you can see up here that because I had the selected vector when I open this dialog, that's selected by automatically for me. So I'm only going to texture within the selected vector region, which is great. That's what I want. And I'm actually going to subtract the little shapes off, close that down, and you can see straight away in our X-ray mode that we've now added dimples. Notice in the grayscale that I created from the artwork that I created previously in the 2D view is not altered by that toggle. Okay. In the 3D, we can see the model more clearly here. So we've got the golf ball effects, and now what I want to do is simply use the back and the front again to create a new mesh in the master model, a new assembly in the master model. So I click Add to Master. I'm going to use the back relief. It's found the name for me automatically, and I just go Yes, and it creates the triangulation for me quite quickly. And again, I'm using a relatively crude triangulation there for speed. And then we get our finished model, which is now, as you can see, textured on the back, so we don't need to worry unduly about polishing it. At this point I can check the usual volume and things. Now when I click Accept, it will go and take this model and put it in the assembly, but it will find that one chord hard already exists. So when I click Accept, it will say, do I wish to overwrite that? So it says replace the existing assembly. If I say no at this point, I'll come back here, I can change that name and try again. And if there's no existing assembly, that's fine. I can keep multiple copies based on the same model with different names. In this case though, I do want to replace the existing one because I am editing it, and I also want to save my ArtCam model just so that everything is nice and up to date. So the heart assembly was successfully saved into the master model, so I click OK, and I can check that that's the case. Here's the project view. Here is my heart assembly. Now by default, if I've got a model open and I'm working on it, I'll be seeing that in the 3D view only. If I want to see the master model instead, I have to toggle this button here, and now I can see between the two. So there's my master model stored in that project tree, and here is my underlying relief. That's fine. I know the file was saved, so I can simply close my file down. And here we are back now in simply the project mode, and here is the new version of our pendant with the textured back. So I'm going to select the top level here, I'm going to save and close the project.